So you would think that with all the attention around RAG, and everyone's building one these days, that it would be pretty straightforward to evaluate, to test these RAGs, to figure out if they're any good. The only problem is you'd be wrong, because evaluating RAGs is actually not as straightforward as you think. But we've got a game plan for you that actually makes it practical. You can get it done. You can live through the experience, and you can do it in just a week or two and get really great results. We're going to show you how. Hi, I'm Neil.
My name's Daniel.
And this is RAG Masters. Welcome to another episode of the world's greatest, probably only show about retrieval augmented generation. I'm sure we're in the top 10 for sure. And today we're talking about something that really almost all of our customers ask us about. Daniel and I both work for a RAG platform company called iLevel.ai, and you'd be kind of amazed. The biggest companies in the world, very sophisticated. We're not going to mention any names, and they will really, one of the first questions they ask us is, how do we test this thing? How do we actually evaluate the RAG that we built? Not just ours, but we're going to test 5 or 6 companies. How do we test? And you'd think it'd be straightforward, but it's kind of not. And so we've built a really simple framework that we walk our customers through. They find it really valuable. We thought we'd make a video about it because I think everyone's going to really, hopefully, get something useful out of this. And we take a really pragmatic approach. Actually, it's more human than technology, so be ready. But with these just 5 steps, it's actually 4 steps and 1 piece of advice. You can figure this out for yourself and survive the experience. So it's really simple. You curate documents, you generate QA pairs, which become ground truth, so questions and answers about those documents. You run those pairs against a RAG system, and you compare basically the original QA pairs, that ground truth, versus what the RAG provides as an answer. But that's really simple, but we're going to tell you why, step by step, it's actually problematic, and then how to solve it. And step 5, I'm sorry, we're a technology company. I don't want to say this, but LLMs have a hard time grading their own homework, just like you and I do. And we find they can accelerate some parts of this process, but you still need human beings to get involved. Daniel, before I jump right into curate the documents, what are you seeing out there when you talk to customers?
Yeah, so I'm seeing people that don't know how to test RAG. I think you nailed it on the head. It's kind of an existential issue for, I think, a lot of companies that are dealing with documents right now, because they simultaneously feel like they have to develop and iterate and move forward and stay on top of the AI technology train.
Okay.
And then by doing so, they adopt a lot of technologies. I think they feel, the technical team feels a pressure from the business side. The business side feels pressured from the core technology. Everyone wants to move this train forward, which is great, but the testing's not there. And what I see, frankly, not only at iLevel, but also as a writer around data science and who's built AI companies myself, what I see is people flopping. It flops. Like, imagine if you were building like an app and you never tested the app. Like just because it's hard doesn't mean you can avoid doing it. Like, you have to test these systems. And just because no one knows how to do it, and just because there's not tooling around it, doesn't mean you can't do it. Like, if no one's telling you how to test, we're going to tell you. But if no one tells you, and if you can't find any resources, then you have to build it yourself, because you can't put a product out onto the market without testing it. So what I'm seeing is a lot of people not testing, and a weird amount of people like not even talking about testing because it's like such a boogeyman.
It's hard, and what I see is a lot of projects don't leave. They don't make it to production. Like, the engineers build a RAG, and then it gets to the first layer of customers, which usually internal staff, and then folks are like, well, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. So let's get into it. Let's forget the preamble. Let's just dive right in. So step number 1, you need a to curate some documents. That's obviously the core of any RAG, is generally some pile of unstructured documents, often PDFs, but not exclusively, CSVs, etc. You would think that there's a great public data set out there. The first thing that we do, the first thing everyone does is they go, everyone's had this problem before, let's go search for some public data sets. The problem is most or all of what we've seen out there are actually data sets designed to test LLMs, not designed to test RAGs. What you see in front of you on the screen is a chart from another RAG platform, not ourselves. I erased their names and logos and stuff because it's not important who exactly this chart comes from. But I think what's important is what they're testing against. And it makes it seem, when you see this chart, that this RAG platform does great. They're like, wow, look at how well in the yellow we do against these metrics, these standard open source benchmarks. But all of these benchmarks, when you scratch the surface, don't actually test RAG at all. They have two core problems, all of them. Number one, they're not based on original source material. They're basically human beings have extracted text from web pages or PDFs, and what's in the RAG is text extractions, pure text. So problem number one in RAG is, can I take my complex visual documents, parse them, translate them into AI-ready data? And then part two is search. So part one is completely eliminated from all of these data sets because there are no source documents in the RAG. They're basically text. And that leads to part two, which is that they're almost always based on public information. They're based typically on wiki pages, but not always. Sometimes they're based on 10Ks, or they're based on, trivia websites or popular IMDb, whatever. But they're based on things that all the LLMs have been trained on for years now. And so you're not really testing whether your RAG can produce some answer about Wikipedia page, because every LLM in the world has already read all the Wikipedia pages. So I think these things fall down on their face. But I know Daniel actually has a slightly different opinion about this as a data scientist. So let's have some healthy debate.
Yeah. So I think you're totally right. Like, if you are a RAG, or if you're a company that's employing RAG for your use case, then these data sets are not going to cut the mustard, because they're not for enterprise. I think it's really important for people to kind of understand the fundamental difference between a company and researchers. And I think this is kind of the crux of it. You say RAG is a technology, researchers work on technology, there must be a data set for RAG. But what companies do is they build a product. You're not a RAG company. We're a RAG company. You're probably not a RAG company. You're probably a company that's employing a RAG system. And you're employing a RAG system to work on a particular problem in a particular vertical with specific types of information. Your users have specific types of needs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And like AI is great, right? It's an incredibly powerful technology. And you can apply it to your problem, and it can get you a lot of the way there. But then you're going to have to refine AI. You're going to have to build prompting strategies. You're going to need to build your own custom data sets. You're going to need to build tooling around this stuff. There's always, research will give you kind of the soul of what you need. And that's what's amazing about it. That's why AI exists, is because researchers are pushing the puck, but it'll never get you to product. And when you're testing, you're not a researcher. You're not testing cutting edge AI strategies. You're not, well, maybe they're cutting edge in their own respect, but not from like an academic perspective. You're trying to build an actual product. And what researchers do is they're not interested in your product. They're not interested in your vertical. What they're interested in is the cutting edge of AI. So they go, there is a class of problems that's at the edge of what we can do. Let's make general data sets to test that specific problem. Then let's work on AI solutions so that we can solve that problem and push the horizon further. That's what researchers are interested in. So there's a fundamental disparity between the sort of goals of researchers and people in industry. And that means you can't just grab their data set and then you expect them to perfectly map to the product that you're trying to build. I think they're useful when you're getting started. You can stress test certain environments. There might be open source data sets that align with some part of your system. But I think it's really important to realize that these open source data sets will only get you so far.
Fair enough. With that said, let's get to what you actually can do if you can't use the public data. You have basically two options. Number one is build it yourself. And ultimately, this is where you want to get to, because you do need to ultimately test a rag on your own material. Or we'll show you in a second, we've actually curated some data sets because we've been doing this a while. And we've made them open source and free to use, and we'll explain that in a second. But if you want to do it yourself, we've got 3 very simple pieces of advice. Number 1, engage your subject matter experts early. Okay, the engineering team, unless this is a rag that's serving the engineering team are probably not the experts on this material. It's going to be legal, HR, insurance, whatever, healthcare, whatever it's going to be. The thing is, this will take some time from the subject matter experts. They're going to have to do some work on your RAG project to help you curate documents and help you generate QA pairs and help you evaluate them. So you got to get their buy-in early, or this is going to be bloody, because now you're giving people work, and no one likes homework. I thought hey guys, I thought you were going to build an AI that was going to save me time. Now I'm teaching you. What are you talking about? Now it's my job to tell your computer what to do. People don't like it. Get them in early. Number 2, start small. Okay. In the end, your RAG could be thousands, hundreds of thousands, or maybe even millions of pages of content. Certainly it's true for our customers. But you can't start there. Start with something you can manage. We suggest really tiny, no more than 100 pages of documents to begin. You'll get there, but start here, small. Trust us. You want a knowledge base you can get your head around. And number 3, diverse multimodal documents. And Daniel, why don't you explain what that is and why it's important?
Yeah, so for the non-technical, a modality is a type of data. So documents themselves, you like to think of them as text predominantly, but they're actually complex visual things. If you have a document, there's like text over here, and actually there's multiple things of text. So it's visually organized text. And then actually there's a block that has like a table and a block over here that has a figure. Documents are multimodal. If you're working on a problem that isn't multimodal, if you're working on very textual data, you might not need a lot of multimodal stuff. We've found that a lot of clients have a lot of multimodal data that has figures and tables, and actually the questions people have are about those figures and tables. So that's part of getting subject matter experts in early, so that you can understand what people's questions actually are. That will allow you to curate data sets around the types of questions that people ask. It's probably going to be a variety of complex types of documents and questions and formatting and all that stuff. You want to make sure you have that in your data set early, because the whole point is we want to test our system to see if it works well. And if you're missing a modality that's fundamentally important, then...
Amen. Preach, brother. All right, let's get to, so that's DIY. If you want the shortcut, we've done this a bunch, and we have a couple of data sets that might be useful to you. You don't have to use them, just useful to you if you want. What we've done to test our own RAG systems is we built the following. The first data set we built was 100 QA pairs. I think it's actually 94, 92, but 100, basically 100 QA pairs, human created, human tested, on 1,000 pages of visually complex Deloitte documents. And some of the screenshots there on the sort of here in the back right, tables, graphics, all kinds of stuff. Just like a very diverse, troublesome data set, if you will, that are often hard for parsers to deal with. That's why we picked them. Just to be clear, these are public documents from Deloitte. Deloitte's not part of this test, so hopefully they're cool with it. But these are documents they've published publicly on their website, PDFs about their consulting work and foreign interest rates and all kinds of juicy stuff. The second data set is the same as the first. In terms of it's still 100 QA pairs. But what we did next was we added another 999,000 pages of what we call decoy documents. And this helps you test RAG search at scale, where what really happens in a real RAG system is, user X only has questions about this sliver of life. The document set is actually pretty massive, and the RAG search has to navigate through all of this to find the right results. So we have that data set as well. The third one's the most interesting data set, actually. These are, and the most complex to deal with. These are something we call X-rays. So actually, Daniel, why don't you explain what these X-rays are, and then how we clean them up and make sure they're healthy to use?
Yeah. So we are we're a RAG company. So our job is to understand documents and then answer people's questions based off those documents. One of the things we do is parse documents. So we take a visual document and then we understand it. We have a specific tool for that. It's called GroundX Ingest. And what we've done is allow potential customers that are interested in our product to upload their sample documents that are complex visual formatting. And then they can see how our parser deals with their document and understands it. So as a result, we have a lot of internal documents from a variety of potential customers throwing their most difficult documents at us. So it's kind of curated to be the worst of the worst of parsing strategies. And what we've done is, of course, we don't want to release this data publicly. But what we've done is we've cleaned it, we've gotten rid of PII, and we maintain it internally such that you can test a RAG system based on this super duper complicated data. We're also not releasing it to the public because we don't want it to be gamified. It's really valuable to us that it is kind of pure and people aren't developing AI systems specifically to solve it. So we're kind of keeping it locked up. But we do have that if you're kind of an enterprise client and you want to do a really, really robust test of RAG systems.
Yeah, just to put a point on that, we also don't want LLMs to hoover it up. If you post something on the web, the next version of a language model of all of them will basically have read it and already have this knowledge. So it's a little bit of a funky cat and mouse game. You want to have a great public data set, but you actually don't want to put it on a website. So anyway, email us. We're happy to work with you and share the data set. Just to give you a sense of what we're talking about, like this Lightroom, the object here at the bottom is a screenshot of It's taken from a Adobe Lightroom manual, a piece of software from Adobe, and lets you manipulate photographs. And this is the kind of real world stuff people put in. It's got a screenshot in it, and some of the text in the screenshot is obscured, and there's some actual text that's easy. It's very multimodal. And so we've got thousands of these basically. And just to be clear, this is never stuff that's private data. These are things that we've scraped through all of these. We've removed PII if there is any. We only use the best of them that are from public sources. So it's a clean data set. Any rate, if you want to really test your RAG against some badass documents, we've got some killers. All right. Next step is you create ground truth. What is ground truth? It's really simply someone has gone through the material and they've created correct question answer pairs. They've created a question, they've written the answer, and it's true. And again, the SMEs are the ones that probably have to do this in your organization. It's a pain in the ass. They're not going to love it. In theory, you can use LLMs to do this. And all the RAG eval softwares out there advertise that they're good at this. If your content's really simple, this might be fine. But the problem is if you have complex content in these tables and graphics and other things, the LLMs themselves may not understand that content. And the RAG system you use to help generate those question answer pairs with the language model also may not understand that content. And you're kind of stuck in a loop of like you're only testing the simple things that the LLM and the RAG could figure out in the first place. So you wind up not testing the hard pockets of your data. So we recommend, it's human, it's painful, but let humans do it. Now, to make your life easy and their life easy, don't start with like really theoretical, abstract question answers. You can get there eventually, but this is a beginner's guide. Start with things that are like true. There's a question and the answer is 52, or the answer is the United States of America. Obviously not that, but just, it could be a sentence or two, but it can't be a paragraph. It can't be like a speech, because it becomes very hard to evaluate whether that RAG answer is really true. It just takes a lot of time. And again, you want to get through this so you can get to the next stage of testing. And we recommend writing prompts and testing those prompts so that when a question is asked, it does produce a very simple, verifiable answer. Next is and start small, again, like the documents, 100 pages, 30 questions. Start with something you can deal with. You're going to build it to 100 questions. You can build it to a couple of hundred, but don't start there. And lastly, and I think this is most important, a third. We call it the rule of thirds in our company. And Daniel, why don't you explain what the rule of thirds is with ground truth?
Yeah, so as we mentioned, there's a variety of types of modalities within documents, and you're going to want to test those. If you are only asking questions about text and then a user asks a question about an image in a document, then you have no idea how well it's going to go. So what we recommend is you just split up the modalities that is important to you and you just make an equal amount of questions based on each modality. That helps you get a really good spread. What we're chiefly interested in and what most companies are interested in, what are the biggest problems generally, are text, images, and tables. So if you're dealing with normal PDFs, we recommend basically splitting up your questions, a third text, a third images, a third tables, so you can make sure you're getting comprehensive coverage on your testing.
That's right. And look, it also helps you figure out where those problems are going to be, which they're probably going to be in tables and in graphics. RAG text is, I think, universally pretty good today. Tables are okay. Graphics are hard. So that's where your problems are probably going to be. So make sure you build your tests to test exactly that. Ironically, running the test is the simplest part of the entire thing. There's plenty of eval software out there, open source and closed source, that makes this really simple. And they have nice GUIs, and they can help automate the firing of questions and the receiving of answers out of a RAG. Frankly, you could also just write, 20 lines of Python and do the same thing. But I'm not saying anything bad against eval companies. There's plenty of other benefits to using these eval platforms. We tend to just write 20 lines of Python because we just want to fly. But either way, this is actually the simplest part of the process. And then you get the evaluation of the results. And this is where actually we probably have a philosophical disagreement with most of the eval platforms out there. A lot of companies, do basically will evaluate by LLM. And there's frameworks like Ragas, and there's some others. It's not bad. The problem we see is when we actually compare, when we test what that evaluation is, we find, 15% often, maybe sometimes 20, I'd say 10 to 20% discrepancy between the actual real answers verified by a human and the LLM's ability to judge the answer correctly. What they're basically doing is they're evaluating, here's the ground truth answer, here's the answer that came out of the RAG. Are they saying the same thing? Now, the simpler you make the answer and the ground truth, the more likely, the better these automated eval systems perform. I will say that. But when it gets to things that are a bit more conceptual or complex, or the answer comes from multiple places, you really start to see a gap in what the LLMs can do. LLMs can't grade their own homework. That's just a fundamental problem. This relates to number 2. Keep it simple, stupid. From my perspective, there's a lot of frameworks out there to talk about completeness and these other relevance, these other kind of more conceptual ideas about how good an answer is. You can get there. It's fine. We just don't start there. Like, just things that it's right or it's wrong, because your job is to figure out, is my ingest working and is my search working? You're not so much trying to figure out, is DeepSeek better than ChatGPT or whatever. You're testing the RAG, not the language model. So you got to get verifiable results. Keep it simple. And number 3, this one's so important. And Daniel, why don't you take the next slide when we get to how you scale this up. But number 3, we see this all the time with our customers. We produce a RAG test, a RAG evaluation, and ask them to grade the answers. And the first thing they do is grade the style, because like it's too long, or it's too short, or it's like not how I would have said it. And you have to educate ahead of time and say, style is easy with language models. It's not even really a problem. Is it right? Is it wrong? That's your first job when you evaluate, and really your only job in the beginning. Later on, when people ask about style, you can produce style tests. You don't have to do a full RAG system to even test the style, because LLM's just good at it. And it's easy to prompt for style. But everyone wants to go there. Don't let them, because they'll start to give you terrible grades and stuff that's actually right, but it didn't say it how they would have said it. So just set the expectation. All right, with that, you're pretty much through how to get your first bunch of tests done. But I want Daniel, you to come in now and like take us. How do you scale this up? Obviously, starting is great. Where do you take it next?
Yeah, so the first step to scaling up is doing it yourself. I've worked on a lot of AI, and people love to automate immediately. Any seasoned data scientist knows that the most important part is the exploration phase of any data science project. And testing an AI product is a data science problem. Application developers need to start learning some of these skills. You need to understand the data you're working with. And part of what you've done by manually generating QA pairs and manually curating data sets that you think are relevant to your customers is the really, really powerful neural network that's in between your ears is learning a lot about the problem that you're trying to solve. So now that you've done that, after you've done that, you don't do what I'm about to say immediately. After you've done that, then you start thinking about how do you make it more efficient? How can you automate the system? And there's a few problems. One is the curation of data. You can pull from existing data sets to try to grow questions. You can also try to curate PDFs. So one of the things you can do is, Neil mentioned it previously, you can have the documents that you already curated that you really understand, and you can flood your data set with a lot of fluff that's irrelevant. So then you don't have to do any more analysis, and you don't have to make any more QA pairs, and you can explode your data set in terms of how robust is your RAG system to scale without really doing much more work. You just throw more documents at the problem and see if your accuracy on that small set of documents that you understand and have QA pairs for, if that starts to drag. If it starts to decline really quickly, you might realize you have a scale issue and you might want to address that. There's another problem, which is generating these QA pairs. As Neil said, it's really hard. It's deceptively hard, because it's great if you're building a RAG system about something that you intimately understand, but that's probably not the case. There's this one anecdote of a Uber or Waze engineer that became a world-renowned expert in street signs in like Norway because he just had to, because no one else knew the thing. Like this happens with data scientists all the time. So put your hat on, boys. It's about to get crazy. One of the things you can do is you can generate basically a RAG system to help you build QA pairs so that you can more quickly find QA pairs that are good in order to test with. This is great, but it's also kind of a snake eating its own tail, as Neil mentioned. If you're using a RAG system to generate QA pairs, and then you're using those QA pairs to test a RAG system, you might be missing some fundamental stuff here. So some of those principles of human in the loop type of things that data scientists have been playing with for a while, injecting humans into automated loops so that they can start to audit things rather than generate things. In my opinion, currently right now, this is still very much an unknown topic, the testing of AI. But I think human in the loop of automated kind of cycles is really the best way to scale up both the curation of the documents and also the generation of the QA pairs that you ultimately train with or test with.
Those are really good points. And I just want to make one additional point about the scale test, which is number 2. We heard Daniel say we add a lot of fluff. I call them decoys. The idea here is that the thing that's counterintuitive in RAG is the more data you have, the worse it gets. That's the opposite of everything you think about with machine learning. Well, that's not always true. You have to keep good data sets. So you can pollute your data set with machine learning too. But the problem really here is that in the real world, RAG is a 2-part tango. Ingest your documents and understand them, and then search in a large pile of stuff. And it's the search part that you want to test in the scale test, where if you have to find a single document, a single paragraph of text, or a single table that sits inside 100 pages is a different problem than sitting inside 1,000,000 pages. And one of the issues here technically is that a lot of what happens in this AI search or RAG search is based on similarity search or vector similarity. And the problem with the similarity search, it's amazing, right? Super cool. It's like a different way of thinking about it than keyword search, which is very literal. Similarity search is conceptual. This thing is like this thing, and you can search for it. The problem with similarity search is when you have 100,000 pages, you're going to have millions, maybe tens of millions of chunks in there. And now if you have too many things that are potentially similar. And so similarity search starts to degrade actually in quality. And in another video, we'll explain the techniques that you can do to manage with that or deal with it. But it's something you need to be aware of when testing. What you're doing at the test of 100 documents, even if it has the same 100 questions, the results are not going to look the same if you have 100,000 documents with the same QA pairs. So that's what that is all about. And I think we're at the end of it, at least for today. There's lots more if you want to go down the rabbit hole of being, really advanced testing. But we want to create a guide that just gets you off your feet and running. Daniel.
I have one, if I can say one thing.
No.
One really important thing that I think engineers do not get is falsifiability. Your questions have to be able to be wrong. I think we kind of dance, but I really want to, you're building a system that is not trying to prove that your RAG system is good. You're trying to build a system, a testing system that can prove that it's not good. You want to focus on, and it's hard. This is the thing you've been building. You want to show it off. Figure out how to prove that your system is not good. Ask questions that if you get an answer, you can be like, that's a bad answer. You have everything, the documents that you're using, you have to be able to say, we have this feature, let's try to break it. We have these questions, let's try to build questions that'll prove our system doesn't work. And what you want to do is you want to have a really, really evil test that's designed to screw you over, and then you want to overcome it. That's how you build really good AI products.
Love it. So true. So listen, we're going to have some of those public data set that we talked about that we've curated that are available. Links will be in the show notes. Like and subscribe, which I always say 40 minutes into this damn show instead of in the first 30 seconds.
It's tradition.
It's tradition. And I have to say, my daughter basically says, Dad, you're just terrible at this, actually. You're terrible at YouTube. You're never going to make it. As an influencer, she's probably right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time on RAG Masters. Really appreciate it.